Welcome to another Kame House lobby with the 2MK team. We have some changes, mostly to how the game is actually physically played, but small things, quality of life for just about everyone. You can see the new indicator that tells you how your opponent intends to do certain things, like their simple dash and their Z changes.
Are you ready?
So among other things, we'll be looking at the differences in gameplay offered by the small buffs, such as Goku's flurry kick and similar things. Most things in this have seemed to move in the same direction as before, improving the player's ability to convert into damage at certain positions and making it a little bit easier to push forward on opponents who are not defending cleanly enough and get consistent damage even if not the fast damage. As far as we know, nothing at the moment affects our bots directly. They tend to function well either way. So we'll be having more or less the same sort of stream as usual. The changes to lobbies mean that we are, as always, in neither stays on US East Coast 2 lobby, but you can now find us in Circle Match Priority 02. As always, the red hit in front of Kame House, and the passcode is 2717. You can find this information in the stream title, and on our Twitter, 2_MK_FGC. This means that once again we will be looking at uses of assists, how to tell when your assists are on point or not, and specifics of your character's moves. Most of these methods of increasing damage that are not specific to moves have come in terms of the things as you've seen there, sliding knockdowns, making sure that more characters have the sliding knockdown available to convert into damage, but less of them often have the pop-up ability. Or the pop-up isn't really different or hasn't changed in the way it works, meaning that your combos don't end up as long, but you do get to convert more cleanly from things and into super. This often means that a lot of the stray hits, and quite a few of the ones you tend to get when you're pressuring an opponent that doesn't really push that hard, will lead to technically more damage, and in conjunction with the reductions in blue health from before, you'll generally be able to get a more consistent output for what you're trying to do. Presumably that did not go in the intended direction.
俺に手助けなど必要ないが、好きにするがいい、孫悟空。
We have been discussing what is likely to make a player use different forms of the Z change. Characters who use pressure assists often will want the ability to hold forward while hitting the assist and not result in a Z change. The assist itself can also be an easy way to think about this. Certain assists just feel more like they probably should be one or the other. And therefore, when you do this, you pick the other options. So we already see that OmniRabbit uses the new down to do the Z change, freeing up forward plus assist as a method of actually calling the assist. For the most part, given what the assists in question are, it probably makes a lot of sense mechanically and mentally for him. Tenshinhan and Goku Super Saiyan form seem to have been among those that got the highest amounts of... Okay. They got the highest amounts of changes for... their conversions and consistency. In fact, among the few that actually got something slightly beyond that. Interesting tactical choice here. Add some damage to Trunks, even if it lasts only a little bit, to get extra damage on the tail. After all, that power-up does stay. Clearly her thought is who's this poser in yellow. Pay attention on his back name. We've generally been discussing how to think about different player styles in terms of what they are good at causing and what you have to therefore watch out for. For example, getting hit with the low. Trunks is back in, and having got rid of Team Gohan means that one can be a lot more freeform in your attacks, since pushing your opponent through particular spaces helps a lot in this case. Without the strongest punish character on the team available, it's easier to just kinda go ham a bit. Not necessarily in pressure, but rather in specifically space offense. So even with Trunks down, Krillin is a strong character in that regard, and mostly has to figure out, can he deal with Videl in time to get the advantage of not having to deal with Gohan. Since Videl does not pin him down too easily, the same sort of thing happens with the Senzu Bean as in nearly every other match, meaning that this basically comes down to the fact that Tenshinhan is actually much better at dealing with the beam and at opening Krillin up. So let's talk about how these patch notes have affected the players. Specifically, the ones in this lounge, of course.
It's all or nothing.
But first, let's go into things that might actually affect more things negatively than you think. Because while it is an increase in consistency, especially across the cast in general, there are some things that were effectively taken away. You can now Z-change off your standing light follow-up, which is a big deal for certain types of characters who don't really want to have to go into the air themselves and would rather just call a partner to follow up in the air themselves, as you can often have some problems catching up with certain people at certain spacings off of particular super dashes. This has to do with the angle that the super dash hits at. Some characters are better at dealing with this than others in the air, leaving you unable to finish out your combos without making yourself vulnerable in some way. Doesn't come up too often, but occasionally. Most of the time the jumping heavy attack will have a lessened amount of sliding knockdown, which probably just feels better all around and doesn't really have a specific thing that it's meant to do. Probably worth it to have both the instead of Jiren at this point. The jumping's heavy attack can only transition into Z-change when performing a grounded Z combo, which doesn't affect that many characters obviously, but does do some really interesting things. You'll figure it out fairly quickly once you start to do it, but most of us don't know our combos well enough for this to affect a lot, so you're not probably going to see a whole lot of shit. The mid-air Dragon Rush tosses the opponent toward the ground faster when comboed from, which mostly affects, like, 16, I think? And probably Brawly. That was an interesting timing for that. Base damage of Vanish has been increased, meaning next to nothing, except that the opponent is slightly easier to finish off when they're low on health. And some projectile damage scaling things have been fixed, meaning that you might not be able to do some more abusive style combos.
Brace yourself for the coming battle!
Team Gohan has had some changes to his standing light chain and a better hitbox in the startup of the crouching light. Oh, something's exploded. Do one of our competitors get erased? Say it ain't souls, I know someone.
Time to begin the match!
Well, since that's presumably that we should not be talking about Team Gohan at this point.
Get ready! Fight!
Trunks has also had some changes to his stand light chain. In fact, he decreased his distance move forward during the first follow-up, which is actually good for playing footsies in a lot of situations. The second follow-up, furthermore, has increased his hitbox and contact boxes upward, which is technically also a really good buff in that he just has to now do this when he thinks people are going to jump at a particular timing, not enter their space, and then end up hitting them. Basically, it is a change to what we were trying to teach at the very, very beginning. Using your stand light to play footsies to move yourself around in neutral when you don't know what else to do. Basically, that aspect of Trunks has been buffed. However, his crouch heavy can no longer be cancelled into his standing unique attack, i.e. his basically his overhead. His Shining Slash got a range buff as well, probably to offset the decreased distance moved after the light chain, honestly. The ground version damage has also been increased, which is a good thing overall. But there's a longer delay on basically two of them and a decreased delay on the middle one, interestingly. The mid-air version of the Heavy starts up faster, basically correcting for the fact that he is already in the air, which is a good aerial footsie tool, which he basically did not have before. His Cyclone Jump now has a limit on how often it can be used from midair, but it does not in turn limit the number of jumps he has. So if he's already in the air from his cancel or something, he can flip out, but he can only do the move once. On the other hand, he can still jump. Technically, if he had a jump available. However, it is now possible to do the mid-air version from the grounded version. It's not necessarily clear if this is able to be done immediately, but it could be that he can do mid-air, do the grounded one, hit, flip out, do the mid-air one to get back in. The usual dance around that Omni-Rabbit's characters tend to have. Also, he has increased distance on movement on the heavy version of the move. So even better air footsies. The startup for Cyclone Buster is faster, but the entire thing is delayed somewhat. Trunks' assist now has less stun time, less knockback, and where Trunks appears will now change when he's called in at the edge of the screen. So you do have to be careful about that and learn a bit. Goku has a lot of changes to his various moves as well. Mostly, once again, increasing what can be quote-unquote done in footsie. He's better able to play certain types of footsies now simply because of the threat of his light version of his, basically his spinning kick. The flurry kick moves further when he does it, and the properties on it have been changed. This is only for the light version, but it's still effectively adding to his footsie tools. This increases the chances that he can land his stand heavy and can shift the spacing for his Kamehameha. The changes to his Dragon Flash Fist also has a lot of effects that don't seem to be completely clear. It says increases the move's damage and the mid-air version's hitbox. Also, Goku drops faster so you can do more stuff, but this appears to be for all of them, whereas there are separate specific ones for the light and heavy versions. The light version in the air now has an increased duration, so presumably it can be used better now. And the heavy one has a change in where Goku appears when you do it. The attack startup is also changed now based on distance from the opponent, but we're still not sure what that means. When the grounded version connects, you can now use stored input for a super, but most of the time you'd probably be buffering this anyway. The grounded version did lose its jumping attack property, which I don't really think a lot of people were abusing. I mean, the idea that you should be able to 2H his Dragon Flash is not ridiculous, but I doubt it was happening a lot for that specific reason. That said, it does help anyway because you are still having to deal with the difference between that and any of his other stuff. And once again, the Dragon Flash and the flurry kick, the light flurry kick, have some shifted effects, meaning that the jumping attack properties from the grounded version are gone for the flurry kick as well, meaning you can't generally just react to Goku trying to approach you in footsies with 2H anymore. And therefore he no longer is susceptible to that whole, oh, Goku flinched, I'm gonna 2H and hope that it hits him.
Are you ready?
Kid Bull's Crouch Medium has a larger delay when performed at close range. meaning that you can't generally mash this out anymore, but it's probably not going to affect that much. The jumping medium is also different when you do it from a low height in the air, and he has a couple buffs to some knockback, sorry. Mystic Ball also got a good reduction to its hitbox while increasing the distance it's moved, meaning that you can hit him out of it, like physically the interactions of the hitboxes is easier, but the speed of the move means it's harder. The heavy version got a damage increase, and the light version reduced its bounce on ground, so that you can do certain combos differently now. Hard to say whether or not it's better. This Planet Burst Delay Super has had a shift so that now you can no longer take any actions until Tilted lands when you do it in midair. However, you do come down faster, so probably not that helpful, though it's probably much more, he's going to be more punishable now. Vegeta has mostly only had changes to little things with buttons, opponent knockback, duration of crouch heavy. It's the sort of thing that if you don't really understand the character having played him, there's probably nothing in here you're going to be able to seriously take advantage of at the beginner level. So overall, fight him the same way more or less, and let your body naturally learn whatever changes there are for the actual player of the character. You're mostly looking at increased delay on your crouch and light, and a longer total animation for your crouch heavy. Mostly everything else is reduced knockback, which honestly isn't so bad for this character, because even though he does do a lot of zoning, him being sticky is also technically an option, and he did run out of some of this before. The problem with it, of course, being that most of the moves he uses for this are not specifically the best ideas, but it does depend on what assists you use. With certain assists, it means that you're able to stick better with the character now, meaning that we may be able to see some better synergy between Vegeta Blue and Kid Buu assists. Well, since Goku Black is basically the optimal person for this particular thing, we'll talk about him. King Gohan has to do his best to get rid of Goku Black as quickly as possible, because this gets messy really fast. Especially with Goku Black's Warp Strike, which tends to replace almost all of his positions that King Gohan wants to target, meaning that he just can't keep up, let's say. It's almost impossible to zone Goku Black when he's aware enough, and Gohan doesn't really have any moves that cover that space in that way. It's equally hard to zone Jiren, but at least with Jiren you have a chance and have, like, read the timing. then you must deal with the fact that Jiren has 2 assists that are going to keep on blasting you, and then the rest is just patience. The speed of that assist recharge is one of the main things that's going to make Jiren dangerous in this team. His God Slicer attack has been lessened in terms of how powerful it is, meaning that other projectiles will now cancel out, i.e. other key blasts will do this. However, damage has been adjusted. Generally, the move itself has less damage. However, it does have a better hitbox during the startup now, meaning that it's back to being primarily a footsie tool again. The light version has changed the direction of the opponent knockback. And now, after the medium, he will fall more quickly, heavy as well. Meaning that now you should probably be able to use the medium God Slicer, i.e. forward spear stab, to get more stuff than before. Fierce God Kick also no longer crosses up, which I didn't even know it did. Didn't seem like a thing it should do. The medium Fierce God Kick has had its startup sped up, but it now does less damage. Still, given that it's often a move for getting in or getting over things and you really don't want your opponent blocking it, the situation isn't so bad there. And his Super Holy Light Grenade has had the hitbox enlarged during the startup, with a shift on the opponent's knockback as well. It's a little easier to punish.
The battle's about to start. Good luck! 初めから全力でかかってくるんだな。
But with Kid Buu covered and Trunks somewhat covered, let's talk about Bardock. Bardock's medium Rebellion Spear, specifically after the follow-up to the heavy. The second hit of the grounded version no longer hits grounded opponents, apparently. But the opponent will not necessarily fall great down if the mid-air version hits them while they're airborne. And that's straight up on Kid Buu's lightning ball from the air. It seems quite heavy. His Saiyan Spirit move has had Bardock slowed and the hitbox adjusted, but this isn't really likely to become a big deal for a Jitsu style player, as it was not really used for like catching. We've got some relatively big changes on the Android 21 and Brawly side.
The outcome of this fight is anybody's guess.
Android 21 now apparently loses a move after using it once from absorption, but for the most part this probably doesn't terribly affect her. It affects beginners much more obviously than it affects everyone else, but those moves are often used in specific spaces and tend to be stacked up. You might not actually want to hold them the entire time, so it really comes down to the player. Brawly's super combo off the medium has been changed, the combo itself that is. And there's been a change in his knockback from his crouch medium. Pinning down 21 is going to be a little harder overall now. She's had a lot of small changes to her buttons. Mostly only when she hits though. Broly's overall shift stands more or less in terms of speed changes to things. His gigantic claw has had the startup of the light sped up, and the damage of the heavy increased. Generally, he moves forward more during the attack, and has different properties on hit. So basically, Broly hits even harder than he did before. Honestly though, Broly didn't hit all that hard. Still, every little bit helps, and the way you play Broly in a lot of situations means you can definitely get something out of this. His gigantic strike, on the other hand, has had the medium reversion slowed down, i.e. the startup is slower, and the heavy version has lost damage. So I guess you could say he sort of probably balanced out. The Racer Cannon has been shifted in some ways. The move now has more armor. Yes, more armor. And one of them just behaves differently entirely. He also had some bug fixes to his base damage weirdness. And does not float in the air as much after gigantic meteor setups.
It's time to face your opponent! It's all or nothing! Go!
Krillin has also had his Footsies buff, more or less. His stand heavy has increased knockback when your opponent blocks it, meaning that you can finally space it, probably so that not everyone in the game can punish you for doing it. However, his beam does seem to have reduced damage. And not beam, Ki Blast. Reduced damage and knockback, but might hold the opponent still a little longer. This is not really a buff to Footsie's at all. However, his after image has more damage but less knockback, which is kind of good depending on what you're doing. Again, it mostly that when you see that you have reduced knockback, it means you're more punishable, but it also means that when used correctly with certain assists, you get to be more sticky. Krillin also descends faster after the after image actually connects, especially in the air, but during the startup, no actions can be taken until Krillin lands. The rounded medium version now incorporates a back step, and apparently the heavy version has reduced delay when held. Only a Krillin player would know what that means. Senzu Bean is thrown faster, and the rock does stun people for longer, but the startup of the rock itself has been slowed down. It's also been adjusted in trajectory, so we are expecting to see a little bit more careful play relative to the rock. But a little bit more crafty to use the Senzu properly. Generally, you shouldn't be worried about rock in that position anyway. He can, in fact, however, now use a heavy version and throw 2 rocks, because Krillin is a guy like that. When you use Krillin's Kamehameha in the air, you can now hold down to come down more quickly if you want to for some reason. It's not quite clear exactly how this is done, but it should definitely be useful to the sort of player that does this at certain heights. The cancel timing on Solar Flare has been slowed down. And you have to be careful with your Destructo Discs now because they work like Android 18s, and he can actually aim them up or down. This is probably not that meaningful, as there's really no reason you would ever need to aim it down. But I figure that we'll eventually think of something that works like that. I've not found a reason to aim 18s down. His assist is now faster, and where he appears has been adjusted. Also, the trajectory of the rock has been shifted to make it a little bit easier to use. After all, most of the time you want to cover the opponent in that space, and you shouldn't really be counting on Krillin assist for a bunch of other things, so it's probably a change for the best.
The outcome of this fight is anybody's guess.
Tenshinhan has had the knockback on his standing light chain changed, and some changes to the knockback of his blast. Also, apparently is longer as a whole. His jumping light does not have that weird property anymore where if you got hit by the first hit and instant fuzzy gravity downward, that you then were unable to block it properly, meaning that it's a little bit easier to defend against him. But mostly that wasn't a matter of a heavy plan from anyone, that was just like difficult. So he should be a little fairer now in that regard. Medium volleyball piss has gotten a buff to the distance moved by the ground version, as does the heavy, but the startup of the heavy is also faster now. Crane Strike has gotten improved damage, different properties on hit, and even more distance moves. So overall, he's just better at doing what he does best, getting from point A to point B and really hurting you for that. There's been increased variation in it, in that his medium version of Crane Strike from the air is slower, but the heavy version is faster on the ground. Why this particular change was made? Telekinesis has increased stun time. This probably wasn't affecting a lot of people. It just might mean that the move is used more now. Tri-Beam reduces the amount of health consumed by the attack and increase the base damage. So you can get some extra follow-ups, as we've seen already on the stream. But mostly you should be focusing on the fact that he will not hurt himself as much when he does it. And the same for the Neo Tri-Beam. You're not going to get a lot out of this if you're waiting for your opponent to kill themselves. And on top of that, he'll hit you harder. So basically the advantage has shifted in that direction quite a bit. You can see the bounce change on Bardock. Sparking is relatively harder to use on Vegeta, as he doesn't really have a lot of ways to convert out of heavily without putting himself at risk. But as you see, Tensho had managed to not kill himself. Congratulations.
俺も昔はお前と同じ悪人だったな。俺は貴様が思っている以上に強くなりすぎてしまったようだ。
Showdown is about to begin.
Adult Gohan has had relatively few changes, at least the kind that anyone cares about. His machine gun kick has gotten the most changes. They're all relatively minor. He now has a hitbox right until the moment he lands though, which is kind of important. And you can now go from the move into super, which again is important for the player, but not really something you care about as the opponent. And it's relatively binary, i.e. if you wanted to go into super, you will now go into super, and that will be pretty much all you have to understand about it. And if you were being hit by this move and your opponent could go into super, you didn't have any options, so you're fine anyway. The medium, however, got a change to delay when landing after it, which might affect some things. And the heavy bounce off after it's guarded properly, so that is probably one of the most important shifts to it, though what we've seen so far indicates that it didn't actually matter that much. Some of his other attacks have also allowed him to get the super into stuff out of them, and this is again quite helpful, but not really something you need to understand as a player. He did get a buff to the speed of his elbow when he is not yet powered up though, which is only on the heavy but still useful. Is the mid-air version only as far as it appears to be, but still helpful. Note that for this move he will now face the opponent after the action, even if he lands on the other side, so there's less confusion, and you will probably be a little bit more comfortable not waiting for your mind to catch up with the directions of things on screen. His assist has been shifted so that if the opponent is in the air, or you are near them, Gohan will appear closer or more toward that side, making it a little bit easier for you to use this both as a defensive assist and the other move. And still, unfortunately, did not work. But the invincibility on the assist is shifted so that now Gohan's assist is only invincible against jumps. This generally doesn't mean a whole lot because the change made to it, well, change made to the system beforehand meant that you really couldn't mash this out of block stun anyway, but there were certain frame trap style things or certain specific spacings you could put yourself at where the opponent's best option was to immediately call Gohan assist and make sure you couldn't try to come back in, rather than attempting to deflect you. He basically no longer has this ability, but you're still most likely going to hit Gohan and not necessarily the actual person. So the situation isn't necessarily worse or better, it's just different. The most important thing probably being that the invincible version before would make sure that the opponent got hit and therefore was on the defensive, and now you can't be as sure of that. So for most defensive uses, it's about the same now. This move actually has reduced pushback on block, but apparently if you bob on it like that, it's really not that meaningful, and you continue to be carried. Although before, I suppose you immediately got carried to the other end of the screen, so it's a sort of meaningful change. While one might not expect Jiren and Videl to have gotten many changes, there have been a couple things shifted. Mostly bug fixes on Jiren's. His Colossal Slash initial hitbox was repaired. Although honestly you probably got better confusing things and mix-ups from it. But for Amara it's more likely better that it's not disconnected from his position. This had to do with how he got moved around in the air by certain attacks or pushes and similar things. His crouching light attack is now part of his Z combo, meaning that he has been given effectively a Z combo. And you can super dash without having to specifically do a super dash input for certain things he does. But this is just natural either way. So while helpful, I doubt it was going to have a whole lot of weird effects on people. His jump medium and jump down heavy were changed, but his jump down heavy is... The main thing there is that the move has a bigger hitbox during the startup, which is helpful. Still that about covers it, he's not exactly a character we were expecting to see a lot of shifts for. The most likely thing to help in this matchup from the Goku flat side is the shift in that move. As we've just seen, there are some differences now. Bug abuse. The increased footsies from Goku means that he will probably be able to deflect more often as well. And worry a bit less in certain positions as we've just seen there. Forcing the opponent to put more pressure on him directly. Kiddo is another character where Goku Black's warp attack is likely to cause stress. Not necessarily because Kiddo has no way to hit it. He has a little bit better time, a little bit easier time of it than King Gohan does, but because he has to worry about more things in neutral as a whole, meaning that he gets his offense reduced. With the particular assists used in this team, it can get even worse. Bardock deals with it way better. What Bardock does not deal with quite as well is the fact that Goku Black can cross the screen very quickly. So this is a fairly good matchup, and is this kind of good? This one is difficult for Jiren primarily because of the delay between certain moves Jiren does, meaning that Vegeta gets more options than most characters do, because he just tends to have a rhythm that beats it. Jiren often has to defend nearly perfectly to deal with this, and it doesn't get any easier.
Vegeta, win!
この俺を超えてみろ。簡単には超えさせないがな。
Everyone's favorite Yamcha has gotten what most people are considering a decent buff, in that all of the follow-ups of Wolfang Fist can now be done regardless of if the first attack misses. However, you can hold back and prevent this from happening. You can also use Gale Claws as a follow-up for Wolfang Fist in general, and there's some increased distance and change knockback. Meaning that he rushes down even more than before. However, the knockback on the finisher has been shifted, and there's some shortened timings for some of the inputs, meaning that the follow-up directions also shift, making your life a little bit hard if you're not on point with the character. You do have to worry about him more at mid-screen though, so you gotta be careful and be ready with that stand heavy or special move, as he now requires a lot more difficult timing relative to your assist to keep him out of this space right in front of you. At full screen, you're probably fine. At mid screen, now you have to be scared. To balance this out, he has had the base damage of Ultimate Wolfang Fist reduced, meaning that he does even less damage. Regular Vegeta has had changes in the same vein as Super Saiyan God Vegeta, i.e. Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta. Basically, more or less, shifts to when his projectiles come out, how fast they are, and some more difficult, let's call them conversions. Basically, that he no longer has the interceptor kick without a clean down input, and while the certain moves do have faster startup, they also have less hit stop. The Big Bang attack will now bounce the opponent off the ground when the mid-air version hits, which is relatively useful for a lot of reasons. And he descends faster after the mid-air version of Final Flash. There is a shift to the reduction in, a delay reduction shift on his super dash kick. The medium mid-air version specifically. He also has a delayed timing for the vanish on the light version, meaning you're not less likely to get mixed up by that vanish cancel. Yamcha proving why he's the strongest character in this game. Yamcha players are likely going to have to adjust to the fact they have these longer range options, but shouldn't always use them and will often need to play similarly to before, simply because the opponent is more likely to try to zone you if they stand there. There is that mentioned delayed stuff, meaning that you do have not necessarily better Oki per se, but you definitely have more options to make your opponent not just attack you immediately.
Should be a great fight.
Which leaves us to cover Cell before going into a bit of a break on this particular aspect of stream. Cell's standing light is now faster, which is probably the biggest change on his entire list.
It's all or nothing.
The follow-up has been changed if you are holding back when you do it, and you can slow down the move. This is the follow-up of the standing light. You can slow down the move by holding down. So the two of those things basically mean that Cell is even more perfect. The other follow-up, the spacing for the throw has been extended upwards, so you cannot easily... I think the main thing is by catching like instant air dash. You should probably be able to jump straight up on reaction, but instant air dash to actually take advantage of the telekinetic grab to get closer to Cell might actually be difficult now. He can also super dash better, and the timing after it, the stun time is increased, but the duration of the moves is different now. And in some bug cases as well. His crouching light attack has also had the startup decreased, so it's faster. This is the second best buff he's got, probably. His air key blast has had its landing time and delay shifted. And his crouching has also had some shifts. His rolling crouch, the elbow, has now had its properties on hit adjusted. It's not really clear what that means in this case. But it starts up slower in the air now. The light version anyway. The mid-air version of the heavies is faster, meaning we might finally have some aerial conversions. The speed of descent on the light version is changed in mid-air, so it looks as if he may in fact finally be able to convert off stuff, even if it's still not going to do that much damage. Expanding the roster of characters you need to play along with Cell once again. He has draw in on the perfect attack, but the move does less damage now. This is the heavy version. Slightly bigger hitbox on his mid-air Kamehameha, which is probably useful in that his zoning will increase. But I'm not really seeing this changing a lot of Cell's play. His assist is also better. More hit stop. More knockback, but most of the time in the new way that he tends to get used, that's a good thing. And it has a larger hitbox, meaning you can't like happen to navigate through it, and it's even stronger in terms of being used in that scramble situation we were discussing on our prior two streams. Now we see some being thrown off here based on their timing, but most people will adjust after a little bit when it comes to shifts in the timings of their character moves. Interestingly, knockback is a lot harder to adjust to, as you probably build up a whole lot of mental muscle memory. I have no idea if that would have killed before.
Android 21 win.
さて、勝った自分へのご褒美タイムね。いただきます。
So we're about at the halfway point of our stream, and while there are definitely more changes to cover, those are the ones that are primarily important for the characters you're seeing mainly. Meaning you're going to get a bit of silence for a bit, or at least commentary that is not trying to read very interestingly worded. You could say they're patch notes. I mean, they're obviously called patch notes. I don't want to call them patch notes. Anyway.
さないぞ。
おかしい。素晴らしい力。
これから見せるのが本当の力だ。見切った。
俺が直々に相手をしてやろう。おかしい。神の力を見るがいい。その痛みが私を強くする。
終わらせてやる。
お前はつんと
誤算だったな。敵だって成長するんだ。俺も気を抜いていられないな。
Get ready for battle! It's all or nothing! Go!
もう終わりか。
登場ね。
もういい。
終わりよ。
無駄だ。
終わりよ。
無駄だ。どうだ。飛べ。そこまでだ。飛べ。ナッコ。飛べ。行くぞ。飛べ。死ぬがいい。俺が殺してやろう。
Starting to wonder whether or not Android 21 and Videl have the same voice actor. I'll be looking into that.
殺して行くぞ。こいつはどうだ。いったさて無駄だ。見えたぞ。どうしたカメハメハ邪魔だ。仕留め。ありがとう。邪魔だ。ちょっとゲームをしよう。ステイプさてどうしたカメハメハ殺してはい覚悟はいいか。
For various interrelated reasons, Broly does not deal as well with Yamcha. And Nappa brings it down with the rebel yell.
ちょっと挨拶が丁寧になりすぎちまったかな。
This should be a great fight! Ready? Fight it out! Counter! Amazing! Amazing!
どうしたまあまあだな絶対に許さんなめんじゃねえよまあまあだな絶対終わりじゃねえか死ぬのはてめえだまあまあだな絶対に許す絶対にクリリさんお願いします絶対に許されこっちだいいずってやるか許さんぞ任せてください
Amazing!
これでも食らえこれでも食え見てた攻撃はクリリンさんそこかはい俺がやってやら交代できますかどうだなんだいっぱい飛ばすぞなんだ残像だ譲ってやるかそこだ逃げるなよ逃が 飛ばすぞ。紹介してくれ。終わらせてやる。バーンコロ俺様だ。やってみせる。無駄だ。目のだ。そこだ。貴様の相手はこの僕だ。今のうちにさらにやっぱり飛ばすぞ。ビッグマン宇宙の塵にしてやる。こんなものか。こんなもんか。いっぱい飛ばす。終わりじゃねえか。絶対に許さねえ。俺の本気見せてなめんじゃねえよ。いっぱい飛ばすぞ。選手交代だ。点数をつけるとしたら笑ってんな。ビッグバスだ。なめるなよ。ここを見ている。こっちだ。なめる。逃がすか。やろう。貴様の相手はこの僕だ。調子に乗るな。そこだ。いい加減にしている。
ゆっくり眠らせてやる。二度と起きないようにな。この俺を超えてみろ。簡単には超えさせないだな。
It's time to face your opponent! Get ready! Fight! なんなんだ？もう終わりか。グズメ。孫悟空。下がってよ。甘い。その程度か。行くぞ。終わりだわ。頼む。俺に指図するな。
見せてあげる。おいで。そこで合わせるかしら。合わせるかしら。
終わりだ。
そこで
驚き者だから。
まだ
さっとしろ。
これはどうかしら。無駄よ。そこ。これで。させない。よっ。これで。そこへ。
どうということはない。
貫いて。その程度か。これで。よっ。まだよ。パー。 知らない。まだ
驚き者が
冗談じゃない。
反転調子に乗るな。
そこね。そこ。
素晴らしい力。
やっさせない。
やれさっさとしろ。
させない。助かったよ。
神の力を見るがいい。
神にあらがう罪人がスピードには自信があるんだ。ここは譲ってやろう。
まだ終わりだ。かわせるかしら。これでこっちへかわせるかしら。
愛してやっと
かわせるかしら。貫いてかわせるかしら。これでかわせるかしら。そこね。
俺が殺してやろう。全力で来い。悪は滅ぶ。何なんだ。なんだと。行くぞ。終わりだわ。見えている。クズめ機関なんてやつだ。どうということはない。殺してやる。バカな。
この強靭な肉体勝てるものなどいるものか。
そう楽しませてもらおうか。
皆さん驚き者が
この程度カメハメハ。
終わりだ。かんな。
スピードには自信がある。こいつはどうかな。
嘘だ。
暇つぶしにはなったな。貴様の攻撃など私にとっては蚊に刺されたようなものさ。
The battle's about to start. Good luck! Are you ready? Go! Counter!
お前たちはどこか遠くへ避難していろ。
許さんぞ。よっ。
じゃあ少しだけ。
この拳銃様を許さんぞ。よっ。 した。どうした。クリリンさん、行くぞ。まだまだ。
さてと、何だ。
いっぱい飛ばすぞ。
無駄だ。
くそ。
許さん。
逃がさないぞ。
無駄だ。
自分の成果を見せてやる。
そう受け止める勇気があるか。
こっちだ。どうだ。そらよっ。見えた。いっぱい飛ばすぞ。招待してくれ。
とどめだ。バリオポテンクス。ラキだ。行くぞ。クリリンさん。はっ。シュート。
相手だ。そんな。加勢します。いっぱい飛ばすぞ。これでも少しは腕を上げたんだからさ。
Brace yourself for the coming battle! クリリンさん、そこか。甘い。
負けないわよ。まだよ。こっちよ。あらあら。
やってみせる。切った。この攻撃だ。
そこ。おいで。
ストップ。
させない。お願い。マリー。見せてあげる。
まだいける。まっすぐ。切った。
しまった。負けないわよ。
すぐに終わらせてやる。そろそろ砕け散れ。そろそろカメハメハ。お次も
どうした
そろそろくらえ。
許さんぞ。
すぐ楽にだ。
本気でいくぞ。
許さん。
お願いします。
さっだ。カメハメハ。
大丈夫か。
スピードには自信があるんだ。なんだと。
許さんぞ。
無駄だ。
許さんぞ。許さんぞ。今のうちに下がるんだ。
助けてちょうだい。
何だ。
そんなことだ。ここだ。やめな。あっちゃった。
俺が相手だ。
すぐに終わらせてやる。
逃がさないぞ。
無駄だ。地球ごと消えてなくなる。カメハメハ。くらえ。
見えた。しまった。
まだまだ。地球ごと消えてなくなる。
まだまだ。ここだ。ここだ。なんだ。俺も結構やるじゃん。へへ。ちょっとは様になったかな。 わりだ。大丈夫か。メガさん終わりだ。大丈夫か。私を任せる。
この程度置けばやろう。
ハンナ受けるがいい。我が刃そんな。大丈夫か。
その程度この程度か。なんだと。さてさあこの私にバリアー見えている。深くだ。さあこの私にバリアー甘い。下がって受けてみろ。いかにしたカメハメネギもっと甘い。
なんと無様な姿か。
こっちだ。さあ
驚きも調子に乗るな。驚き者が神の力を見るがいい。利息大丈夫か。神の力を見るがいい。これが神の技だ。ハンナ
無駄だ。この私にバリアを張らせると
なかなかやるじゃねえか。
さてこの私にバリアを張らせると
これならどう
言うんだ。さてくらえ。生意気な。
神の力を見せてやる。ハンナメガさんなんだとは。今オラの出番だ。
そうショーの始まりだ。さあさて茶番は終わりだ。人の強い落ちろ。無駄だ。俺が破れるだと。
余裕俺ってば宇宙一強いからね。
Get ready for battle! これでも食らえ消えたんぞ消えろぞ機関銃機関銃にそこでどうだもう終わりか機関銃もう終わりか行くぞハエだ
食事のしろ
うわ邪魔だやるな頼みますフランクス邪魔だ
怪我しても知らないわよ。これで見せてあげる。
この程度か
ちょっと許さないよっよっよっはっ
よっ大丈夫か
そこね
父だお願いしますトランクさん
お願いこっちかわせるかしら
クビリさん
かわせるかしら
お願いします
こっち貫いて負けないわよ
行くぞ
よっ終わりよハンド
こっか
やめたあっちゃった
すぐに終わらせてやる
お願いしますトランクさん
どうしたさてとお願いしますさてとさてこいつはどうかかいカメハメハッだらマジだカメハメハッ落ちるよはっユンユンだカメハメハッユーさてとこいつはどうかカメハメハそろそろまだまだカメハメハ地球ごと消えてなくなれ許しませんぞカメハメハ
クリリンさんマセコーだマセコ
カメハメハ無駄だ何かそうか
これから見せるのが本当の力だ
こいつはどう
バカだ
地球ごと消えてなくなれ
よし行くぜ
まだまだ地球ごと消えてなくなれ暇つぶしにはなったなだからウォーミングアップだと言ったではないか
outcome of this fight is anybody's guess. Are you ready? Fight it out!
頼む。いや少しだけ。
俺に指図するな。さっさとしろ。
Amazing!神の怒りを味わえ。協力してもらう。私にバリアを張らせるとは。
カンナ。
茶番は終わりだ。行くぞ。待ってやる。邪魔だ。待ってやる。ここだ。見えている。なんだと。じゃあ少しだ。ここだ。甘い。
せいぜい楽しませてくれよ。
どうということはない。行くぞ。甘いぞ。悪は滅びろ。捕らえる。
すぐに終わらせてやる。
俺が破れるだと。
暇つぶしにはなったな。不意打ちでも狙っていたのか。残念だったな。It's time to face your opponent. All or nothing. Let's go.
クズめじゃあ少しだけ
終わらせてやるバーニング
楽しめそう
何の攻撃だ
仕方ないわね。はーいやこれで
クリリンさん
全員はっはーこれで全員はー
待ってクリリンさん
とった
そこか
俺が殺してやろうザクだ交代だ
交代できますか容量で無賛造
こっちよはーとっておきそう
せん
それそこふっこられたあっちょっ
いっぱい飛ばすぞ
すぐに終わらせてやる何か
行くぞ捕らえたふってふっけーとっておきだはーふっ
さあかい許さん
どうだいっぱい飛ばすぞ絶世どうだ誤算だったな
Trunks win.
世界もみんなの笑顔も俺が守ってみせる
For certain characters, that has now become an actual semi-valid tactic. Specifically, knowing that the opponent cannot really do too much at you if you charge at full screen, other than to vanish themselves, or to charge themselves. So we may see in the actual game, without it being more so ironic sort of beginner play, the actual full screen I'm going to power up now between two characters that don't have good ranged attacks. Jerry will generally want to be one of the characters most capable of doing this, and I guess now Sal would be even more capable of doing it than before.
The battle's about to start. Good luck! Ready? Let's go!
きますよ藤井さん。どうした？
せいぜい楽しませてくれよ。このベジータ様を失望させるなよ。
すぐに終わる。
ありがとうございます。
さて
バトンタッチだ。
どうした
今度は俺が行けば。
ここは譲ってやろう。
甘いくらえ。
すぐに終わらせてやる。
これ以上好きにする。終わらせてやる。
なんだか戦い方をテストされてる気分。頑張ったからあんまり怒らないでほしいな。
This should be a great fight! Get ready! Go! 何なんだ
Alright, and we are back with the final part of this, specifically looking at Gotenks. There's been a mild change on his standing light attack, the shortening of the timing needed to make into the follow-up when the first swing misses. His stand heavy doesn't take him as far, but it does increase the knockback, so you can probably find better ways to use these inflictions. Similar to Tenshinhan, he has had the properties of his jumping light shifted, so that once you block the jump light, all hits afterward can be guarded crouching. His Miracle Super Punch has been changed in that you can now hold with all of the buttons, and some reduce delay for the grounded version on the light. He also moves a bit more. He also moves more on the heavy, but has less knockback on the mid-air version. It's difficult to say how this works for him, you'd have to look up something more technical. It might depend on the type of combos you normally use. However, it is a decrease in the overall delay of the move when he's in mid-air for the heavy, so you can certainly use it in more situations. The rolling kick has had its damage increased, but additional damage scaling onto the first hit. So the move itself does more damage, but things that come after, if any, not so much. Also, the opponent knockback has been changed, and he faces the opponent during the final hit, meaning that we've got that cross-up fix. Or rather, the cross-up confusion fix. The light version moves forward more, and has increased the on the grounded version, and the medium one also has an increased forward movement. Glided Donut can now be deflected, or rather, if you deflect the first hit, the second hit will not do anything. You can hold up just before Gotenks actually throws out the attack to shift the hitbox of it. Same goes for his assist. If you deflect the first hit of the donut, the second hit will not get you anymore. I wouldn't say this specifically makes it easier to play neutral against Gotenks, but it is a consideration if you went for something slow and you happen to get the deflect right. The rest is just minor shifts related to his volleyball attack that were different-ish when Piccolo was on your team. Stand up to volley here, this is a bit much. He is short though, that does help. We can also discuss Nappa a bit, since we did skip over him. While he's not being played right now, he is a character you're often going to see. He too has a shortened timing needed to link the follow-up to his stand light when the attacker misses, but he cannot perform the follow-ups from the stand and light attack with any crouching moves. His Ki Blast now has a hitbox on the initial strike, and the opponent will always be knocked forward. The initial Ki Blast can now be deflected, and it normally treats it as the same normal Ki Blast as before. However, his jumping down heavy can now be jump cancelled when Sparking Blast is active. And jumps are no longer reset when landing during the attack, which is kind of a big deal for his combos, at least in the corner. Also starts up faster, moves forward more, increase the knockback. It's just generally a stronger move overall. However, you can no longer cancel the attack before landing, so you gotta be more careful with it. His arm break now changes if you hold the move, and the damage of the move is generally increased. And there is a change in the color of the heavy side command. You can also do additional inputs to shift how the side command actually attacks. So you can look into that. Probably has been added to his command list in some form. Damage for slide and acid are reduced, and the acid is no longer affected by the stun time decay that combos cause, meaning you probably get extenders. I suppose it's probably fine, because if you were skilled enough to do that and time your attacks relative to your Cyberman's acid, you probably deserve a little bit more payoff than you're getting. The self-destruct has had its damage increase as well. And his Blazing Storm attack, not only has the attack position been changed, but you can change it yourself if you hold the input. When using his assist, Nappa will always appear at close range, which generally means that Nappa can be hit. This is going to be different in different ways, so you have to figure out what is going to happen directly from there before you make any decisions. But in some cases this will still be useful, because it will generally mean that he will take the hit for you. It would mostly depend on whether or not you were also at close range, so that you both get hit by the same thing. You'll most likely see that sort of thing next week. This is a really hard thing for Trunks to pull through, given that Trunks tend to create scrambles, and Gotenks with both Cell and Vegeta as backup doesn't really get hit that much or bothered.
Showdown is about to begin! Are you ready? Let's go!
無駄だ。しまった。もう少しだよ。さて、くらえ。だ。くらえ。すぐに終わらせてやる。この程度、ささのにバリーを無駄だ。いいだろう。祭りにあげる。どうして。どこへ。何。さてともう終わりか。何。
怪我しても知らないわよ。助けてちょうだい。
どうした。そこは譲ってやろう。
許さない。
この程度か。さては少しだ。さてと。許さない。
怪我しても知らないわよ。
遅い。
タンクのアーチをどうかしら。
少しはやるようだな。
これでどうだ。
無駄だ。さっじゃあ少しだけ。
Brace yourself for the coming battle! Are you ready? Fight it out!
さて、無駄だ。
何のどうだ逃がさないぞ。カメハメハどうだよっ
雑魚がすぐに終わらせてやる。無駄だ。
どうだよっ飛ばすぞ。
無駄だ。ここは譲ってやる。
交代してくれ。
どうだ今さらさら覚悟しろ。
やります。これを使え。この攻撃からそこか。
雑魚が
これでも頼みます。マセンやってみる。切ったマセン
大丈夫ですか。
そんなはずはない。覚悟しろ。
マセコ
雑魚がセルがいい。
クリリンさん
セルがいい。行くぞ。
さすがベジータさん、なんて強さだ。クリリンさん、引退しても力は衰えていないな。僕も見習わなくちゃ。